for that.
This way, please, gentlemen. This way. Each side, keep walking. Stop up on the board. Keep walking. Take your time. Use the board. Use the pop. Keep walking on the board. Keep walking on the board. Okay. Come back over here. That's fine. Over there? Yeah, that's fine.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral services of Mrs. Ada Stock. Rabbi Lizzie Heidemann will be officiating.
You all want to be back here, or do you want to be like basically toward the front?
Come over here.
Yeah.
Come right here.
What I was just reading as we were walking was Ecclesiastes chapter 3. L'chol zman ve'et, l'chol chafetz tachat hashamayim, et laledet ve'et lamut. For everything, there is a season, and a time for every experience under heaven, a time for planting and a time for gathering in, a time for keeping and a time for letting go, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for distancing, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for crying, a time for dancing and a time for grieving, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. Welcome, everyone. We're here to mourn the loss of Ada Oschinsky Stock. My name is Lizzie Heidemann. My grandma was one of Ada's best friends since their childhood in Breslau. And as adults and mothers and recreational tennis players and ultimately old ladies on the south side of Chicago, our lives were intertwined through my grandma and Ada. I also happen to be a rabbi, and I'm honored to be here facilitating this morning. So a little over a week ago, Wendy and Peter reached out and said that they weren't sure, but they sensed that this moment was coming. And they wanted to be prepared. And it could be months, it could be weeks, it could be days. And ultimately, Ada knew when the right time was. And she waited until both of her children, upon whom she lavished so much love and who lavished so much love right back on her throughout her 100 years. Well, I guess not throughout her 100 years, starting from the moment you were born and the moment you were born until you were right by her side. Ada's passing also represents the dying of a generation who had seen the worst of what humanity was capable of and somehow transcended it and built lives here in America that enabled a future that included all of us. We owe everything to Ada and to people like her. So this morning we will begin to honor her life and her memory, and we'll continue tomorrow night on Zoom. So for those of you who have your own stories, I hope you'll tune in tomorrow night and you'll be able to share them. So we're going to say Psalm 23 now, and I'm going to share then a little bit of Ada's biography that came much from the beautiful obituary that Wendy and Peter wrote, and then we're going to hear eulogies and reflections from Wendy and Peter and Andrew and Julia and James. And then we'll commence with her burial. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai rohi lo echsar. Minot desha yabritzeni, al mei menuchot yenachaleni. Nafshi yeshover yancheni b'magle tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech begeit samavet lo irara, ki ata imadi. Join me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Mizmor la'ada, a psalm for Ada. Something, some kind of great force. This is not in your not in your sheet. Some great force of protection and love was her shepherd. Somehow this fundamentally kind, unconditionally loving, cheeky, irrepressibly resilient person who lost everything at age 18 had everything at age 100 and at every point in between. Ada was a happy kid, a beautiful and resourceful young woman, a life partner and wife of, I tried to count, 56 years to Werner, an unconditionally loving mother to Wendy and Peter, and most proud grandmother to Julia and Andrew. And somehow, despite unimaginable loss at an early age, Ada lacked nothing. The psalmist writes, though she walked through the valley of the shadow of death, she wasn't bitter and she wasn't afraid. And she didn't just find comfort and love, she created it for herself and for everyone around her. Ada was born on March 2nd in 1920, in Breslau, Germany, which is now part of Poland. Her parents, Erna and Albert Oschinsky, already had her mischievous and doting older brother, Werner. They kept a kosher home. Her parents owned a textile business, and they all lived on the second floor of a duplex and had a nice relationship with the neighbors downstairs who turned out to be Nazis. And it may, in fact, be that nice relationship that saved them all. Ada had a happy childhood surrounded by family and friends, many of whom became her lifelong friends in the journey first to England and then to New York and then to Chicago, and some of whom she was destined never to see again, including her parents. She fled from Breslau to Great Britain in February of 1939, right after Kristallnacht, and through a work program for German Jewish youth. And she initially worked as a housekeeper and then in an armament factory making bullets for the British troops and sewing uniforms for them during the London Blitzkrieg. She lived in a hostel for German refugees in Golders Green and spent countless nights in air raid shelters during the bombings. And meanwhile, her parents were able to escape Germany and ended up in Cochabamba, Bolivia. A psalm of Ada. The psalmist writes, he guides me along the right path for his name's sake. So in 1948, her path shifted course to New York, and she moved with her beloved Scottish Terrier, Lucky. She scored a job at the famous Hattie Carnegie fashion house. Hattie Carnegie, who happened to be a Viennese Jew who immigrated a generation earlier, rags to riches story, and who gave Ada a chance on the basis of her experience as a seamstress. Though Ada didn't continue making clothes professionally, after New York, she did make all of Wendy's clothes growing up, to Wendy's chagrin, because they were not the cool clothes from the Sears catalog that all her friends had. But somehow you turned out okay, Wendy. Ada moved to Chicago in 1949 with the encouragement of all of her German friends who were settling down in Hyde Park and on the South Side. She worked at Esquire magazine and started dating and eventually married Werner in 1951. They had 2 impossibly adorable and very smart children who she raised in Park Forest when they finally moved into their dream house in 1959, where she lived up until she moved into Montgomery Place. She involved herself in community activities like the League of Women's Voters, Jewish Council of Women, and her crowning professional achievement being a nursery school teacher for several generations of South suburban kids at the Anita M. Stone JCC in Flossmoor. When Wendy and Peter were in grade school, Ada became an Avon lady, selling makeup to folks in the neighborhood, not because she needed the money, but because it was funny money. As Werner traveled for work, Ada held down the fort and provided stability and love for Peter and Wendy as they went through school. She reveled in their achievements and the achievements of her husband, and when Wendy and James got married, the greatest happiness of her later years were, of course, Andrew and Julia. Ada and Werner spent countless hours delighting in every activity they could with the 2 of you, and the 2 of you are better for every minute of it. We read in Psalm 23, "Only goodness and love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Ada never had the chance to finish high school, so she downplayed her intelligence, but everyone knew that she was smart, and she was also anti-elitist snob. It didn't matter what background or walk of life a person might come from, she embraced you. She had a strong sense of people. She knew a quality person and she valued you. She could pick a phony out in a minute and she wasn't shy about telling you that. Even as her strength waned and she lost vision and mobility and hearing, you could feel her inner strength and resilience, and more than that, her love. Despite everything that happened to her in those early years, she harbored no bitterness. Everyone was drawn to her. Everyone loved her. The grandkids' friends called her Oma. She knew what was right. She knew what was good, and she lived by that. And in her own simple way, she was a model for all of us. Yehi zichrona livracha. Her memory is a blessing. Wendy, come on up.
Resilience and radiance, 2 qualities that best describe the essence of my wonderful mama, Ada Stock. My mom was a survivor in the truest sense of the word. She survived the horrific dissolution of a warm family life filled with happiness, friendship, and joy in Breslau, Germany, as the Nazi regime consumed the lives of millions. She survived the Blitz of London as a young refugee. She survived the uncertainty of coming to another new land, America, with only a beloved Scottish Terrier, Lucky, and a few dollars in her pocket. She survived a crippling case of rheumatoid arthritis in her early days in this country to build a new, happy, and warm family life with her beloved Wernie, a humane, witty, and charming husband and partner in her life journey. 2 children whom she adored, a loving son-in-law, and grandchildren who were perfection. And she was the final survivor of that wonderful generation of my small family. That's what makes this moment even more poignant and makes me already ache for her sweet smile, that friendly voice ringing out, "Good morning, Mandela. Is it a nice day?" On the phone, wherever, whenever, she was there for us, ready to spring into action. Resilience. Ada lived life with a pluck, a smile, and a winning way. There was no bitterness or complaint. She viewed herself as incredibly lucky, and she often told me, I've always had an angel looking over me. Friendships were key. Once Ada made a friend, they were a friend for life. She had incredible people skills. Her sense of justice was pure, and her judgment was impeccable. She was fun and energetic, and cast a bright light and a tight web that radiated far and wide. Her earliest friends from Breslau scattered over the world, but were always in her closest orbit. Lotta, Alice, Eve, like sisters, they reunited in Chicago and would laugh, argue, and be there for one another at a moment's notice. I marvel to this day at the friendships that my mom maintained. Who needed the internet, Zoom, or Facebook? Ada was the mastermind of her World Wide Web, and she linked us together. Her reach extended to people she rarely or actually never saw again after the age of 18 years. Renata, Lilo, Steffi, Eric, Eve, many in foreign lands, but to me as a child, they were like neighbors whose lives and voices and handwriting I knew so well. As we grew up, Peter and I, my dear cousin Anne, and later James, Andrew, and Julia were so lucky to come under the spell of my mom's friendship wand. Her friendships, her friends, and families became our friends, and the link continues to this day. I have such wonderful memories of many happy weekends in Lakeside, Michigan, at the Pogel Estates, ski vacations with the Schrimmers and Wolves, always with homemade lunches. Crazy to pay for a bowl of chili at the ski area. Passovers with the Yates family, and my favorite holiday, Thanksgiving, that my mom always orchestrated beautifully, and which we celebrated around our dining room table in Park Forest with my wonderful stock side of the family, the Schaefers, Korns, and Heidemans. Linked in. Her sweet little notes, often illustrated with her cute, hand-drawn cartoony figures of smiling doggies and a waving Ada, were cherished. The bright yellow rotary wall phone at 232 Thomas Street in Park Forest was in constant use, and while the frequent incoming calls made me a bit crazy, they delighted and energized my mom. Ada had an extra long cord placed on that phone that stretched around the whole kitchen, in which we would often get tangled as she spun around, chatting, setting the table, cooking delicious meals. Come over, have some soupy, some tea, eat a cookie, my schnooky cookie, or 2 or 3. Her Western Union calling, every birthday message were treasured, coveted, and delivered exactly on time every year to her family and friends and their children, and later to my lucky friends and family who so looked forward to that ring. Even during the last years at Montgomery Place, her warmth radiated. She would always remind me to make sure that the bowls on the coffee table were filled with hazelnuts and Toblerone, and that cookies and cranberry juice or tea were at the ready should a new or old friend happen to drop by. My mama was a doer. She connected, she volunteered, she invested herself in the life of her husband and her children, and she loved her little immaculate house and yard in Park Forest. I will always have a sweet memory in my mind of Ada, happily pedaling her little blue bike with a wicker basket down Thomas Street to greet the neighborhood and deliver homemade goodies to her gang. This was happiness for her. No fancy vacations, restaurants, clothes, or other trappings needed. For her, of utmost importance was keeping a promise and being part of a community. Never one to take school too seriously, she would often say, "Genug is genug." That enough was enough, and that it was time to go to bed. Just put the book under your pillow, Mandela, and all you need to know will go right into your head. On the other hand, writing a thank you note promptly and making sure that Peter and I were polite and friendly to one and all, that we reflected a good Kinderstube upbringing, these were key. Later, as Peter and I had the luck of traveling far and wide for work and pleasure, my mom's constant reminder was to remember to reach out to friends or distant family who might live in the city that we were visiting. It was great if we could go to the Louvre or to the Musée Rodin, but calling on my dad's dear friend Bernard Thierry, now that was a meaningful trip to Paris. As achievements go, there is no doubt in my mind that as proud of my mom was of Peter and my educational and career successes, my biggest coup came by marrying Jamesy, her favorite son-in-law. My wonderful mama was getting a bit worried that she would not become a grandmother and that my dawdling about in medical school was impeding this process. And she took things into her own hands. Of this you'll hear from James. A few years later, the arrival of Andrew and then Julia completed my mom's dreams. Becoming Oma was the pinnacle of her journey. To immerse herself in their lives with my dad was truly her greatest happiness. That yellow phone jingled again from dawn till dusk as she enthusiastically regaled countless Andrew and Julia stories, how incredibly talented and sweet and smart they were to every family member and friend who really was only too glad to share this incredible happiness with her. For me, to watch the delight, the bond, the love that they shared was amazing. And so very thrilling for me, especially because I never had the opportunity to meet or be hugged by a single one of my grandparents. It seemed so just, so perfect. In her last years, her warmth and engagement reached new friends as she set up shop in her bright and warm apartment 413 at Montgomery Place. To us, it seemed so right that she finished her journey in Chicago, steps from where it began. The wonderful folks at the front desk became fast friends. Steve, Dawn, Wenzel, Deshawn, and Shay looked forward to a wave and a kiss as my mom would head down to her little water aerobics class in her little blue robe, or out for her daily walk, often to the point where she would sit gazing peacefully at the glowing horizon. She enjoyed the beautiful garden at Montgomery Place, the lovely Sunday afternoon classical concerts, and Friday night lectures. She was able to continue these activities until her last days, thanks to her incredible and loving caregivers, Laya Oluwu, Cassandra Kendrick, LaFrance Thomas, Ruth Renola, Evelyn Mensa, and Nikki Lamodi, all of whom have become life friends of our family, and to whom we're so grateful for their true love and outstanding care of their Oma. I so much look forward to that grounding, sweet goodnight kiss from my mama as I stop on my way home from a long, tiring day at the hospital. My day was complete. I miss them so much already. Resilient and radiant, beloved by all whom she met throughout her life, my mama, I'm the luckiest of daughters.
Well, there are so many things that have been going through my mind about how to properly eulogize my mom. I'm going to begin with something light, mostly so I don't lose it from the start. When my mom first moved to Montgomery Place, she told the biographer that interviewed her there, and I quote, "This is a place to get an inferiority complex with all the academic luminaries around." And Wendy has just reminded me of the story of having dinner at Montgomery Place with my mom in her first month. And the people were going around the dinner table introducing themselves. There was the usual University of Chicago PhD in quantum physics, the winner of the Field Prize in mathematics, the Nobel laureate in economics. And then my mom introduced herself and proudly proclaimed that she had a PhD in desserts. Now, I am sure I inherited that piece of her DNA. It's a funny story, but that whole interchange reflected my mom in a nutshell. She always knew what was important in life: family, friends, health, and a simple place to call home. When you think about her life course, fleeing Nazi Germany alone at the age of 18, surviving the Blitzkrieg in London, and forging a new life in the U.S., It's no wonder she prioritizes the right things. She had a heart of gold and was genuinely kind to all, finding the best in everyone, unless someone dares say something bad about her children, or even a bigger offense, saying something bad about the grandkids. They were definitely off the friend list. Actually, as I think about it, you might be off the friend list if you said anything bad about our dog Mardi, who she spoiled to the hilt. Some say more than her children. But her loyalty to her childhood friends is evidenced by the fact that these 4 childhood friends from Breslau, Alice, Eve, Lottie, and my mom, all ended up together in Chicago, all lived long and remarkable lives. And their children and their grandchildren are all linked by this bond, including our Rabbi Lizzie. I am so grateful for the last 2 years I had with my mom, and I have to thank her wonderful caregivers, Lai, Cassandra, LaFrance, Nikki, Ruth, and Evelyn. They made it possible for us to be with her at the end of her life. It gave me the chance to take my mom out to her beloved point, where she began her life in Chicago. Even when she began to fail, and it was hard for her to sit for long periods of time, she always wanted to stay longer, not saying much, but smiling and looking at the horizon and reminding me in her subtle way to slow down and appreciate what's important in life. Although my incredible mom is no longer with us, I have some comfort in that she was with my equally amazing father and her soulmate again. I will miss her subtle wisdom and genuine kindness to all. I hope I can channel her wonderful attributes and remember to value what is really important in life.
Wendy was right. I was Utta's favorite son-in-law, but she failed to point out that I'm her only son-in-law. I started my pursuit of Wendy Stock at the University of Illinois early in our sophomore year. It wasn't until 3 or 4 years later, however, that I was invited to the Stock Thanksgiving to meet the parents. What Utta thought when the Scotch Presbyterian from a large family in downstate Illinois arrived for dinner is not known. But from that moment on, I always felt welcome in the Stock home. After growing up with my mom's cooking and enduring years of dorm food, I was in heaven with Utta's fine cuisine. Dinner was delicious. Like Utta, my mom also instilled in me the importance of thank you letters. And between my voracious appetite and my letter writing skills, I was in with Utta. Fast forward several years to 1984. Wendy and I were back in Chicago. We'd been dating for over 10 years. Utta won her. Wendy and I were celebrating Wendy's 30th birthday at Lutz's, a fine German cafe, when Utta proposed that we get married already. Without further discussion, we accepted Utta's proposal and set the date, and within months, we were hitched. Incidentally, Lizzie Heidemann, Rabbi Lizzie Heidemann, was our 3-year-old flower girl.
Each of the 5 of us here who are speaking today can only
speak to a fraction of Oma's life, an incredible life that has been talked about several times already, that spans over a century back, spans from old world to new, from Breslau, Germany to the south side of Chicago. Relatively, our time, mine and Oma's, was brief. But the impact of Oma on me was both indelible and profound in ways that I'm still figuring out, ways that are both concrete and intangible to me. When I was thinking about putting this together, I was thinking about my earliest memories of my life, but with Oma. She was there my entire life. I've been told by my mom that in the first couple months of my life, when she was a resident, I was often just dropped on Friday and picked up on Sunday in Park Forest as a one way to unburden her during those busy days of residency. And I'm sure there's, the black box of early childhood. I'm sure that played a huge role in shaping who I am. But one of my first, and maybe my first lucid memory, was the day my sister was born. It was kind of Oma took me to the museum. I think it was just the two of us. Took me to the Museum of Science and Industry and occupied me throughout the day. And I remember walking down 59th to the hospital with her. I don't remember anything about Julia being born. Nothing. Supposedly the only thing I was fascinated with was Big Bird at the museum and the fact that the bed was remote controlled and you can... But Julia's birth, I've completely blacked that out. But the day with Oma was wonderful. And every day with her was wonderful. I have so many positive memories of my childhood. Going to 232 Thomas Street in Park Forest. And I was spoiled and doted on so much by both Oma and Opa. And one of the big highlights, maybe once a month, was we got to go to Toys R Us, the big Toys R Us off the highway. And until the last couple of years, Oma always reminded me that there was one time when I was a kid, and I'm not as good at the accent work as my mom is, but I wanted to get some Crash Test Dummy action figure, and Oma thought it was the dumbest thing, and made that quite apparent when we were there. Would not let me get it. She thought it was a very crappy toy, and instead pointed me in the direction of buying a basketball, which became my, childhood, high school, still to this day passion. So next to Michael Jordan, I can credit Oma for instilling a lifelong love of basketball in me. But every weekend at Thomas Street was so great. We'd watch tennis, play mini golf, play tennis, play rummy cue. There's always snacks around, always activities to do. It was just a profoundly happy place in my memory and in reality. And I think, every speaker has kind of spoken to this, but, visiting Park Forest, it felt like, like I was a returning prince or something, just being the grandson of Otta Stock, being shepherded around the neighborhood, walked house to house, the people I knew and didn't know, and, partaking in whatever, just walking in with her and just feeling like, they would put aside whatever they were doing to entertain us, and it was such an honor to be her grandson, and she acted with such radical kindness and radical openness, and you've heard about her background, and someone with that background who left her family and never saw her parents again when she was 18, had every reason in the world to be bitter and kind of stuck in that moment. And I, not one time, ever sensed that. She was kind, she was forward-looking, she was open, she took everyone in, gave everyone a chance, but again, she did not suffer fools. So, but everyone had a fair shot without a stock, and her warmth was contagious. Her quiet resilience and toughness and lack of bitterness are all qualities I hope to carry with me. One of my last memories with her was we went on this trip to Israel in 2008 with the temple group and with the South Side temple community, and it was me, my mom, dad, Oma, and I was too old for there were two buses. I was too old for the kids bus and kind of too young for the adult bus, but I had a perfect seat partner in Oma. We both kind of like to just, mind our own business on the bus. And we kind of silently experienced the trip, not taking it all in rather than being more proactive. But I remember one of the last stops, we were in Haifa, and we were in getting a tour of this communal living facility. And out of nowhere, she was asking the most pointed, inquisitive questions to the hosts of the tour after silently kind of taking it all in. And like you said, she was kind of always downplaying her education, but in that moment, I was like, she's smarter than everyone here. She's sharper than everyone here. She's taking it all in. Like Lizzie said, her memory will always be a blessing. I'm so honored to have been a small part of her life, and I hope to be a part of her continuing legacy, and I hope to continue to live my life in her image and in her example. Thank you.
Oma showed her love in hand squeezes, French toast, phone calls, kisses, and games of Hopa Hopa Reiter. She loved extremely generously. In the winter of 2013, I did one of my favorite things. I brought a newspaper over to my Oma's apartment in Montgomery Place for us to read together. By this point, her vision was failing, and so I read the newspaper to her while sitting by her side. Oma listened attentively as I read the obituary for Nelson Mandela. At the end of the article, she turned to me and said, "It's amazing how someone could experience so much hate and come out of it and still have so much love." I responded, "Oma, you did the same thing." She looked at me. Nonchalantly, she said, "Sure, but it was different." I couldn't see the difference. Though she rarely spoke of it, Nazi Germany stripped Oma from her joke-filled childhood, separated her from her family, and forced her into a foreign country with harsh expectations for survival. And yet, throughout her life, Oma continued to approach every person she met with kindness and a desire to connect. Her love transcended age, class, race, and experience. Oma loved in a way that made each person she spoke with, whether it be one of my kindergarten classmates or the first female mayor of Wheaton, Illinois, feel important, respected, and admired. Her earnestness cut through pretenses and allowed her to connect meaningfully. Growing up, I played violin. From age 4 to 18, I performed in 2 recitals a year at DePaul University with about 20 other violin students, and Oma attended every one. At the end of each recital, Oma would find each performer and ask them to autograph next to their name in the recital program. She would look them in the eye and with absolute sincerity say what a great job they had done and that she needed their autograph for when they became a famous violinist. Oma made everyone feel cherished. Oma always focused on those around her and never on herself. It was demonstrated in how I never saw her sit for more than 5 minutes for a meal in Park Forest because she was too busy serving the beautiful dinner she had made to the others at the table. And it was demonstrated in how she highlighted the accomplishments of others without regard to her own triumphs. I am so proud to be my Oma's granddaughter. She was my hero. I hope to live a life of generous love, just as Oma modeled for me during every day of her life.
Thank you, all of you. And for everybody who's here, you're here because you also have Ada stories. So I hope that you will come tomorrow night and share in a warmer place from the comfort of wherever you watch Zoom to share your stories too. We're now going to begin to lower the casket, and I'm going to sing the prayer that asks that her soul be elevated and held with all of the souls of the pure and the holy. And there's a line at the end you'll hear, Utsror b'tsror hachayim, may her soul be bound up. It's often translated as in the bonds of eternal life, but very literally it means hachayim, with the living, with all of you. So may Ada's soul continue to be bound up in all of yours and continue to shine as her life did in this world. El male rachamim shochen b'meromim המציא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהרים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת עדה אושינסקי סטאק שהלכה לעולמה בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתה אנא בעל הרחמים הסתיריה בשאת כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן. You can join me in reading the inside of your pamphlet, the translation. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and the pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of Ada Oschinsky Stock, who has gone on to eternity. Lord of mercy, bring her under the cover of thy wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may her repose be peace. Amen. So I have, speaking of your trip to Israel, Andrew, so this is Earth from the Mount of Olives. And we begin, before we say Kaddish, we actually begin the process of of letting her go, of burying her with earth that comes from the land of Israel and then earth that comes from the south side of Chicago. And the traditional custom is that everyone helps in this process. It's considered sort of the ultimate act of love, the ultimate mitzvah, to bury someone, because at this point there's nothing they can do for you. It's a completely selfless act. And so once we begin, the family will come forward and put this earth in the grave, and then you are all invited to participate as well in covering as much as possible with a cup. We don't have shovels today, but we'll use a cup, and then we'll say Kaddish. Here, you can use this one now, or whoever wants to.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can also come and place your flower into the grave as well.
Give me a little room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are here, in your folder you have information about memorial contributions, and for those of you who are online, just so you know, the people are here, there are close to 50 screens that are watching, so many people that are there. That information is on our website for charitable information.
David, with the stones, don't drop them on the ground. Yeah, I think it'd sort of be like, yeah. Beautiful. Oh, say shalom, Bimrama, Uya, say shalom, Aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Ve'immeru, Amen. Oh, say shalom, Bimrama, Uya, say shalom, Aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Ve'immeru, Amen. Oh, say shalom, Bimrama, Huya, say shalom, Aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, Ve'immeru, Amen. Oh. No, it's okay. All right. Kadal v'yitz kadash shemei rabba. Amin. Nama divra chirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon uvyomechon u'chaye dechol beit Yisrael v'agala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei rabba mivorach leolam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shmei dekudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushvachata v'nechemata damiran v'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Amen. So what we just said is Mourner's Kaddish. This is the prayer that Wendy and Peter, you would say for the coming 11 months, whenever you're in shul. And whenever you feel like you want to touch your mom's spirit in a ritual Jewish way, you'll be connecting with the spirits of the millions and millions of people for whom our people have said Kaddish, who your mom is joining. And we're going to close by singing the last line of the Kaddish, Oseh Shalom, which is a prayer for peace in the world. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael ve'immeru. Amen. And now I want to change the tune because I realized the tune that she probably sang and knew was the old school one. Let's sing that one. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Ladies and gentlemen, just as we conclude the service, we're going to ask everyone to form a double aisle, a shurah, and the immediate mourners will walk through, her son and her daughter, and it's at that time you may offer words of consolation, and those traditional words you'll find on the back of the service folder. So just please follow me as we form this aisle.
Also say whatever you want.
Stay 6 feet apart.
This way. We'll just stand shoulder to shoulder. Folks on this side, you're going to face these people are going to face you. And try to go an arm length apart.
Yeah. The idea, of course, is that all of you get the opportunity to look into the eyes of Wendy and Peter and the whole family and just pay respect.